I was standing in the hospital corridor when I heard my stepmother scream. Not the scream of labor pain, but something else entirely. My father rushed past me into the delivery room, and when he came out 30 minutes later, his face was pale, his hands trembling. He looked at me and said 5 words that would unravel everything. "The baby isn't mine, Victor. But before I tell you what happened next, please subscribe and turn on notifications, because the story gets darker than you can imagine. My father married Auntie Chidinma 2 years after my mother passed. I was 15 then, still raw from grief. Therefore, I wasn't exactly welcoming. Auntie Chidinma was beautiful, soft-spoken, and always knew the right things to say. My father was lonely. I understood that, but something about how quickly she settled into our lives, how easily she took over my mother's space, it bothered me. She redecorated the entire house within 3 months. My mother's garden became a parking space. Her favorite curtains were replaced with modern blinds. It felt like she was erasing every trace of the woman who built this home. But I kept quiet. My father seemed happy. Therefore, I convinced myself I was just being difficult, holding on to grief too tightly. Then Auntie Chidinma got pregnant. My father was overjoyed, talking about having another son, buying baby clothes every weekend, converting the guest room into a nursery. He would come home from his transport company exhausted, but he'd still spend hours painting the nursery walls, assembling the crib, humming old songs. I watched him become a different person, lighter somehow, like this baby was giving him a second chance at something. Therefore, when Auntie Chidinma went into labor that Tuesday evening, my father was the happiest I'd seen him in years. But something went wrong in that delivery room, something that had nothing to do with medical complications. When the doctor placed the baby in my father's arms, he froze. The baby had pale skin, much paler than either my father or Auntie Chidinma. But that wasn't what shattered everything. It was the birthmark, a distinct crescent-shaped mark on the baby's left shoulder. My father stood there staring at that mark because he'd seen it before on someone else entirely. Here's the question that kept me awake for weeks. How long had my stepmother been planning this deception, and was my father's business partner, Uncle Emeka, the only secret she was hiding? My father didn't cause a scene in the hospital. That's not his way. He's a man who calculates, who thinks 10 steps ahead. Therefore, he simply handed the baby back to the nurse, congratulated Auntie Chidinma with a cold smile, and walked out. I followed him to the car park, where he sat in his Jeep, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. "Victor," he said quietly, "that birthmark. Emeka has the exact same one. I've seen it countless times at the gym, at the beach during our company retreat. Identical position, identical shape. But it gets worse." My father started piecing things together. All those late-night business meetings Auntie Chidinma had with Uncle Emeka, the expensive gifts she claimed were from her savings, the way Uncle Emeka suddenly became distant 3 months ago, right when the pregnancy started showing. Therefore, my father did what any man with resources would do. He hired a private investigator. What that investigator uncovered destroyed the version of reality we'd been living in. Auntie Chidinma and Uncle Emeka had been seeing each other for over a year, meeting at a hotel in Lekki every Thursday afternoon when my father was at the warehouse. But that wasn't even the most devastating part. The investigator discovered bank statements showing that Auntie Chidinma had been siphoning money from my father's business account, small amounts at first, then increasingly larger sums, transferring them to an account she shared with Uncle Emeka. They were planning to disappear. After the baby was born, after my father had legally claimed the child and probably added Auntie Chidinma's name to more of his assets, they were going to take everything and vanish. The investigator found flight bookings to South Africa, apartment rental agreements in Cape Town, everything dated for 2 months after the baby's due date. But here's what still haunts me. Were they planning to take me too, or was I just collateral damage in their scheme? My father moved like a chess master. He didn't confront Auntie Chidinma immediately. Instead, he ordered a DNA test through the hospital, paid extra to have the results rushed, and in 3 days he had scientific proof. 0% probability of paternity. The baby wasn't his. Therefore, he scheduled a family meeting, invited Uncle Lemika under the pretense of celebrating the baby's arrival, and gathered Auntie Chidinma's parents, my grandmother, and several family elders. I'll never forget that Saturday afternoon. Auntie Chidinma walked into our living room, carrying the baby, smiling, completely unaware of what was coming. Uncle Emeka arrived minutes later with a gift bag, that same friendly smile he'd always had, the smile of the man my father called brother, his business partner 12 years. My father stood up calmly and played a video on the television, surveillance footage from the Lekki hotel, timestamps and dates clearly visible. Auntie Chidinma's face went from confident to pale in seconds. Uncle Emeka tried to leave, but my father's security men blocked the door. Then my father brought out the DNA results and the bank statements. He laid everything on the center table, like evidence in a courtroom. Auntie Chidinma's mother started crying. Her father just sat there, stone-faced, staring at his daughter like he was seeing a stranger. Uncle Emeka tried to speak, to explain, but my father raised his hand. "I don't want to hear anything from you," my father said, his voice so cold it made everyone uncomfortable. "You're not just a thief, you're a traitor. And Chidinma, you're not just an adulteress, you're a con artist." But then something happened that nobody expected. Auntie Chidinma's younger sister, Ngozi, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner, stood up and said, "Brother Victor's father, I need to tell you something. This isn't the first time." The room went completely silent. Ngozi explained that Auntie Chidinma had done this before, trapped a wealthy man in Port Harcourt with pregnancy, collected a huge settlement when he discovered the truth, then moved to Lagos. That's where she met my father. It was her pattern, her business model. Uncle Emeka wasn't even the father. Ngozi had overheard Auntie Chidinma on the phone with someone else, someone she called Babe, talking about how Uncle Emeka was just a scapegoat because he had that convenient birthmark. Therefore, the question became, who was the real father, and how many other men had Auntie Chidinma deceived? My father's lawyer worked quickly. Within 2 weeks, Auntie Chidinma was out of our house. The marriage was being annulled, and my father had frozen all joint accounts. Uncle Emeka was removed from the business, and my father began the process of recovering the stolen money. But the damage to their friendship, to the trust that had built a successful company, that could never be recovered. Auntie Chidinma tried to fight back, hired a lawyer, threatened to claim abandonment, but the evidence was overwhelming. Her own family disowned her. Even her mother, who'd initially tried to defend her, eventually told my father she was ashamed. But here's what changed everything for me. One evening, about a month after the explosion, my father and I were sitting on the balcony, and he turned to me and said, "Victor, I'm sorry. You tried to tell me, didn't you? All those times you seemed uncomfortable around her, all those moments you pulled away, you sensed something I was too blind to see." I had sensed something, though I couldn't name it then. The way Auntie Chidinma's warmth felt performed, calculated. The way she always had an answer ready, a story prepared. The way she never seemed genuinely interested in knowing me, just in managing me. Therefore, my father and I started rebuilding, just the two of us, the way it should have been from the start. He took me to visit my mother's grave for the first time since the wedding, and we both cried, apologizing to her for letting someone unworthy take her place. 3 months later, we heard that Auntie Chidinma had moved to Abuja with the baby. Nobody knows who the father is. She never revealed the truth. Uncle Emeka disappeared completely. Some say he relocated to Ghana, too ashamed to stay in Lagos. But my father learned something valuable. Not everyone who smiles at you wishes you well, and sometimes the person sleeping next to you is your greatest enemy. He also learned to listen to that quiet voice of doubt, even when it comes from a grieving teenager who just wants his father to be careful. Now here's what I want you to think about. How many people do you trust completely in your life, and what signs might you be ignoring right now? Drop your answer in the comments, and if this story taught you something about trust and deception, share it with someone who needs to hear it.